Hey everybody, this is Perch, and I'm here with Joe. How are you, Joe?
I'm good, Perch. How are you?
It's the world is a delight. But normally we're on here and we're talking about something. I still one of my fondest memories of this channel, like when it wraps up, hopefully soon.
Yeah.
One of the top five moments, probably top three. You're in several of them, by the way. The City of
Oh
Bruce,
boy.
always.
Yes.
But anyway, one of the top and maybe the top was talking to you about the linear verse for the first time, and your reaction. I mean, you got don't spoil it for me right now, but I believe that was a genuine reaction. You were doing a bit.
Yeah, no, I genuinely had no idea because that was one of the videos where you just hit me up being like, gonna record something. I'm not gonna tell you what it's about, just like, come on. And I was like, yeah, sure. And I had no idea, and apparently no one else does either, because I think most people who listen to this video will be like, linear verse, what the hell's he talking about? And that was very recent, within the last few years. That
Yeah, that was like 3 years ago, I think. I mean, it's close.
no,
I recommend people go back and search for that one. I should post that back up because there's a wonderful moment of genuine uh, confusion moving to horror that went across you that
yeah,
I just love. It's I always remember that.
no, I love it too, I guess.
But speaking of horror, and in this instance, I mentioned a minute ago, it's really nice to, of course, always talk to you and have you here on the show. In this case, it's nice because we're pitching your book for a change.
Wow, yeah, no, it's crazy. I figured like the past year or so, I've mostly only been on here promoting, with you, talking about, other people's books. So I was like, boy, I guess I better put a Kickstarter together if I want to get some time with Perch on this channel again. So
That's definitely what it is. Yeah, that's the problem. We don't have something to shill. Um, well, we'll talk comics and everything, but I want to talk about this book because you've got a Kickstarter, and if I'm crazy and anything's possible, it will launch the day this. Yeah, it's out now. If you're listening to this video, you can click on the link in the description in the little teaser things. You can go there now. This is a Kickstarter that's going to run about 30 days, but and horror is kind of our lead in a little bit. There's a horror element
yeah,
to this.
yeah.
Tell us about this book.
Yeah, no, it's a bit of a psychological horror. It's a 24 page, like a queer thriller one shot. It's a one and done story. You're getting the entire story in this book, and it's about a male escort in 1974, New York, who has gone through a precarious sort of situation with a party with some wealthy gentlemen, in the last year or so, and is about to be in a situation like that again. He thinks he knows how to handle himself this time, and there's absolutely nothing that could prepare him for what he ends up, sort of walking into. And over the course of the story, it's sort of this roller coaster of different, stresses and emotions that sort of, I'm hoping people are able to sort of come out of this, sort of thinking, reflecting on the story in a way that, I used to, and I think you did too, from like old Vertigo titles and things like that.
It's a very fancy way of saying you want to fuck people up who are going to read it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
No, I want to upset people. And
yeah.
yeah.
Perfect. You should just start a YouTube channel. You can do that much faster, more efficient. No, I'll joke it aside.
Maryland.
I know from talking to you in the past, and of course, both of us are fans of a lot of these comics and that era of Vertigo and kind of classic comics and everything else. And so, the idea of doing a psychological horror story like this, done in one, you get the entire comic in one issue. There's no wait 5 years for the sequel. You're going to get it here. And why horror? Well, I mean, I'm going to ask you why for a bunch of things, but let's start with that
Sure.
first. And by the way, it's horror, it's thriller, it's kind of a thriller horror psychological story. So why did you want to go there? You've written a lot. Why there?
Yeah. No, I definitely wanted to do so. This story just sort of, came to me a bit. Honestly, part of it was from our interview we did with Rachel Pollack a while back, where she had mentioned sort of this guy who, in London, who had met up with someone higher up in like, British politics, who was sort of like manipulating this like, escort and all of that. And I was like, oh, there's something interesting there. And so I was thinking about that, and then Rachel passed, and then I wanted to sort of do something that was inspired a bit more directly from her for me. So that was certainly part of it, but also really inspired by, again, like those sort of comics, moody, evocative comics. We also have a mutual love of David Lynch. So, so there's a bit of that Twin Peaksy Lost Highway kind of element to it. Um, which I really like. There's even a bit in one of the pages with the close up with guy on the phone, which is very David Lynch kind of shot, which I definitely wanted to intentionally do. It's like in the script that way. But yeah, I love that sort of stuff. In addition to just stylistically, I really wanted to do something that felt inspired by like Gene Colan and Frank Miller, who are two favorites of mine. And Gene Colan was also a favorite of Rachel's. I'm trying to think if it was her or who I was talking to a while back who said nobody draws a hand going for a doorknob like Gene Colan.
It's nice. I that that's so dead on, but I've never thought about that way. Um, no, I do you think comics, I mean, in general, and by the way, as I look at some of the art here, we've got some of the art on the screen and everything else. First of all, it looks beautiful. So, really quick before I go there, who's your collaborator on this doing the artwork?
It's Chase Bluestone. He's an upcomer. We've collaborated a couple of times before. He did the pinup in the back of the first Deadbeats musical horror anthology that I co-edited with my buddy Eric Pollock back in 2019, and then he colored and lettered a story I did for the Sharp Wit anthology a couple of years ago. And then we did a story entirely, sort of just us. It was lettered by someone else, but for the Young Men in Love New Romance, that was kind of like a gay Toy Story thing, which I had a lot of fun with. I got to write dialogue like, do you know if he likes other toys from the boys aisle?
Oh my god, I think we're respectful. You can't just roll out stuff like it's like gay Toy Story and not. I mean, I could the joke. I just want to anyway.
Yeah.
No, but his art looks great. I mean, you mentioned David Lynch, the colors, and who's your colorist for this?
It's all Chase. Chase did
Shit.
the pencils, inks, colors, and lettering is all Chase.
Yeah, well, I mean, hats off to him if you're seeing this stuff on the screen. Legitimately, the art looks beautiful. The shading, the shadowing, the coloring, and it does have that kind of David Lynch pulpy horror. You mentioned a lot of inspiration, including in your link about it kind of tapping into the Bronze Age a little bit, and some of these other areas of comics, and it definitely has that kind of feel to it. It looks just beautiful. So yeah, I mean, it's a really good looking book. So that explains it, horror and kind of thriller. This may seem like an odd question, but why set it? Why a queer setting? Why that setting?
Yeah, for this, we wanted something that tapped into, particularly since it's set in the 70s, something that felt more, dangerous. It's set in a way where it's like, you have to be careful. I mean, a lot of this stuff is illegal. Not just the escort element of it, but sodomy laws and different things. Like it was a very different time, and I really wanted to, sort of tap into that. And, I think there is something, for me, I mean, it's there's this element of it where it's like, sure, like you can relate to some of it, you don't to other elements of it, but that's everything. I mean, for me, Like that, this is a story that would be for anyone who's interested in a sort of like thriller sort of story. Because like again, even though I'm a gay guy writing this, I was not alive. I was never a male escort. I was not alive in the '70s. So
Or, from some of the other things you've done, a superhero, a character in the Archie universe, you've never been those
yeah,
things either, but
I've never been a magician.
yeah, I I mean, there's still time. Uh,
There's still time for that.
but what's interesting there, and I apologize, I will say this clumsy, but hopefully you get my point, you can make it better,
Sure.
in my question, but if I and really I'm thinking about, Rachel Pollack and
Mhm.
the discussion we had about the kinda comic she was writing and the specifically the danger of the comic she was writing, and if you look at a lot of David Lynch, content, he would also kind of tap in, kinda late the great David Lynch would tap into the danger of things, and Lynch used a lot of queer themes because
Yeah.
exactly to your point, it wasn't the movies were not, kind of a 2025 celebration of pride. It was the dangers and traps and struggles and people who were working through their identity in the 70s and 80s, kind of a different time period. And it really added to this thriller, this horror element of take a tough situation and then add in these additional elements to it. And it was very dangerous and raw. I want to say that's Rachel's words, although I could be taking her out of context, but that there's something very interesting about that. And so and I think for a lot of people who listen to these videos now, they're thinking about kind of the latest, Marvel Voices issue or whatever happens to be. But this is a very different universe you're creating here.
No, sure. I mean, this is definitely more inspired. It's a story like this inspired by like Tomb of Dracula and Ronin and David Lynch and these sort
Yeah.
of things. Like because there are different ways you can tell these sort of stories. I think that maybe there are some people, or not maybe, definitely, who when you hear sort of those kind of themes, uh, queer themes in particular, the first thing that comes to mind is sort of a lot of like YA books or YA appropriate books, a certain style, bright colors, um, something that's a bit more um
Contemporary.
yeah, contemporary, something and that's not everything. And like there's a place for all of that stuff, but that's just not what I want to do here. For me, I really wanted to tell something more Bronze Agey, more dangerous, and that's I think that we're being successful with that. I'm also inspired by not just like the works of like Rachel, but I was friends with Howard Cruz. I own some original artwork from him, including a page from Stuck Rubber Baby, which is a classic if people haven't read that one. And that has a lot of heavy inks,
Mhm.
and it's very distinctive. And there are a lot of different stories you could tell, like Ivan Velez's Tales from the Closet, and
Mhm.
Savek Bell's Fun Home, all that stuff.
I mean, that's just in and obviously I've seen a couple pages, so I'm judging also from the art, and your story pitch. But the art, again, like I said before, the art looks great. It's moody. It feels dangerous. There's an element of uh, kind of creeping dread as the kind of shadows play across the face and the close up to the hand. These kinds of elements.
Yeah,
But you said something there, and it's probably a video I'd love to do with you another time because it's a complicated topic and it's one that I think people get they struggle with because it's just easy to have a gut reaction, already think it through. But you
sure.
said something I think really powerful that I wish more people understood, which is not every story has to be the same, and it shouldn't be. There is a place for the YA, Yahweh or BL or queer stories that are brightly colored and feature kind of coming of age romance type themes. That is one genre, but the problem is I feel like people pigeonhole everything into just one single note drama when you can have just like with superheroes, you can have horror superhero stories, you can have thriller superhero stories, you can have nostalgic superhero stories, you have western superhero, you can have all these different genres. It's no different for queer work.
Yeah.
And I think that what you've done here looks amazing. You mentioned Rachel Pollack a few times. We obviously interviewed her, which was also a highlight of the show.
Yeah.
Um, and recently, you did kind of a, I don't want to say a touching tribute for her, and this was well,
Thank
like
you.
a year ago,
Yeah.
featuring one of her characters, Caligula. Can you tell us a little bit about that experience and that story?
So I had suggested, well, it'd be great to do a story with her, but what if we brought her back to life in this in a way that is canonical, that like is all within like because I if I was going to bring her back, I still wanted to respect the continuity. I
Mhm.
didn't want to dismiss the stories that came after that. So I was able to sort of figure out, okay, this is the way to do it. This all fits, and I had also suggested out out the gate, let's get Rye Hickman to do the art and bring back John Workman, who was the original letterer on Grant and Rachel's run of Doom Patrol, back as the letterer for this, and they were both available and both wanted to do it, which really worked out. And I think I don't want to spoil it in case people haven't gotten a chance to read it. You may also be able to get just snag like last year's DC Pride, a celebration of Rachel Pollack, which reprints Doom Patrol number 70. Her Brother Power the Geek story she did with Mike Allred, which is fantastic.
Mhm.
I believe it's Mike's first DC work ever.
Oh wow.
So, yeah, so people should check. If you've never checked that out, you can get that. You can read that story, and you can read a story from me. And yeah, and Andrea Shea, who's the editor on that, was very supportive, very helpful. We were able to sort of put this story together. I was able to reference issues of Doom Patrol that I don't think have ever been referenced, before or since, which was a lot of fun. Got to play with some of the villains like Crow Dark and Foxfur and False Memory and things like that. So it was a lot of fun. It's titled Shining Through the Wreckage because Grant's first arc was crawling through the wreckage. Rachel's first arc was sliding through the wreckage. So I wanted to kind of have that kind of continuity there. And we were able to get Dr. Magnus there to use his smoking pipe. So I the kind of thing that sometimes people go like, oh, are you allowed to do that in the 2020s? But yes, you are.
So very nice. I mean, big credit to Andrea and Andrea and DC, I think, for letting it happen. And for some of you, by the way, just to kind of summarize this up a little bit, if you back following Grant Morrison's run on Doom
Yeah.
Patrol, Rachel Pollack came in, did a pretty awesome run on that title. How many issues ultimately was Rachel on? I mean, it was a
Rachel was on
run,
for 2 full years. There was like 24 issues, and there was the second annual. So
yeah,
it was 24 issues annual, and then there was also a 10. I think it was 8 or 10 pages. In that there was like a Vertigo Jam
right.
that a bunch of people did like shorts in. So that's also reprinted in there, and in the omnibus. And if you get the omnibus, it also has that Totem one shot that Tom Plyer
Right.
wrote that also got collected in there since he had edited a bunch of that. So
So you're talking about Doom Patrol. You're talking about a character in Doom Patrol, one that Rachel created, not just overwrote, but actually created during her run. Uh, and and in the ability to kind of bring this character back to life, which is pretty awesome. For people who are true kind of continuity fans of DC, it's a pretty cool moment, like you were saying. So
thank
definitely plug for that. You get to read something by Joe, but you also get to read some pretty cool DC history and
you.
and that's also pretty good. And cheap plug for when Joe and I talked to Rachel several years ago. That was also
Yeah.
a pretty awesome interview. Um, really quickly back to the book. So again, Kickstarter link is there. You can click on it in the description. You can see it in the video. I think I mentioned earlier. Just correct me if I'm wrong. 30 days. People have a month basically to come in on this.
Yeah.
Perfect. And one and done issue. Tell me about the it's 24 page. Okay.
Yeah.
So I think you and I have talked about this, or at least kind of noted on this before. But comics, it's kind of rare you get a what feels like a complete good story in a comic in 24 pages anymore. It's got to be decompressed to an arc. And you and I have reviewed comics from the Silver Age, some of those kind of wacky Superman stories where they're telling a massive story in like 8 pages. Now, writing a comic one shot, 24 pages, do you feel like, there's no way I'm going to be able to cram in everything I can do? And especially for a moody psychological story where you want to let some of these beats just play out, like how do you do it? How do you get a cohesive story in that amount of space? And it's kind of a leading question, or people just whining too much about today that they need more than.
Yeah. I mean, I do think ultimately, like, yes, there's whining, but comes from personal philosophies and things like that, and how people approach, sort of writing. I mean, one of the earliest professional writers and comics that I talked to and got advice from was Paul Levitz, and he's someone who started with you got to start with these shorts, and then from there he had to figure out how to tell a whole story in 8, 10, 12 pages.
Yep.
And then from there, it was like, oh, now you get a full issue. What would you do if you had 2, 3 times as much space to tell a story?
Yeah.
And it's approaching it like that. So, like, the way I picture it when I'm coming up with the story is you have to be able to distill that story into like a single image.
Mhm.
And then what would it be like if you got a whole page and you got to have multiple panels? What would it be like if you got 2 pages, 4, 8, and you go out from there? So, like, for example, just I'm going to use a very unpopular example.
Go.
So, the everyone's favorite Batman story where Catwoman doesn't get married to
Yeah.
Batman.
The height of
So, like, yeah. So if you use that, sort like for example, you distill that into maybe Bruce, like just an image of Bruce being left at the altar, Catwoman maybe turning back or something like that. Like what would that story look like as one image? Then it's like, okay, now you got a whole page. How would you tell? You have like a little bit of a setup, and then he's left at the altar or whatever you want, and you keep branching. And then what do you do if you have more room? You have more room. If you're able to distill your story into an image, then it means like you really thought it through. I think that it's like, okay, you have something to tell. Like, if your story was just a painting, what would that painting be? Because paintings are also stories. Like, it's, you gotta think in that sort of way, and then kind of go out from there. And I don't want to waste people's time if I don't have to, or if something is delayed, or it has to be intentional. It has to be like, oh, like there's a reason you want to play with the timing in the comic, but it can't just be, oh, well, because this was important to me in the sense of I could have tried to stretch this out into a mini series and pitched it around, but I want to do, I wanted, this was the story. This is how it was done. Like for me, in terms of, I'm doing exactly what I want to do in these 24 pages, along with Chase Bluestone. And we're telling it how we want to. We're not compromising. That's why we're going with, crowdfunding in general. And this time we're using, Kickstarter. But the idea of compromising the story in any way was just not appealing, because there is, while this is not like, there is nudity, but it's not like there's nudity in a, like, in a Vertigo comics and an underground comics sort of way. This is not this isn't pornographic,
Yeah,
like
this isn't Cherry Comics.
yeah, no, this is,
And by the way, no slight intended. I know
yeah.
I know both of them listen to this show on a regular basis. Love it.
No, of
Love
course.
those boobs. But anyway, this is very different. Um, you know what? That still is going to be an insult the way I said it. Uh,
Mm,
so, I'm going to get a letter.
mm.
Anyway, but it's funny because as you're describing this, I'm just looking at some of this art here, from Chase, and it doesn't feel hurried. It doesn't feel skimped on. It doesn't feel like there's, you're having to rush the mood along because you're doing this in a one and done thing. The panels look filled with material. Stuff's moving
Yep.
along. This scene that you have on your Kickstarter page of kind of the car driving, the close up of the deer, the close up of the eyes, the deer goes away. There's just a lot of tension in this one page of 6 panels that is conveying this, but it's not decompressed out. And I guess I haven't heard it described that way before, and but I really like it. It really hits home with me of the idea of you start. Well, I'm just going to keep using the bad analogy you did. You're going to start with Batman left at the altar, and we're just going to build out from there, and you're going to get a story. I, I, it feels like that's kind of become a lost art in comics to some extent because I was, will remain nameless, listening to it. A writer who works for Marvel talk about kind of his approach, and his approach is to say, how can we take a moment and let it kind of spill out across pages, where you're taking, instead of one picture, you're taking that picture and carving it up 8 different ways. And I'm not going to put you in a position to go knock somebody else, but it's like those are two very different philosophies of doing books.
Oh, absolutely. And yeah, that's just not how I like to do it. I don't like, yeah, I feel like for me, I think there's a lot of other, writers and creatives, artists who fall into this camp too. It's a bit more of like, I know I have good ideas. I know I have a lot of them. I know I keep coming up with them. So I'm not that precious in terms of how do I milk this idea
Mhm.
for as long as I can, because who knows when the next idea is going to come. And like, that's just not how my mind works. It's not how I operate. And that's great that everyone works a little differently,
Yeah, yeah.
and that's okay, but for me, I'm not as precious with that. I'm like, I would rather tell my idea in the best way I can than water down that idea or mess with that idea in a way that I think is a disservice to it, just to get more out of it, or
Mhm.
just to, keep this going. Like the way I set up this, Kickstarter, I set up, it's called like Blue Coral Comics, because these are just collaborations with me and Chase. And if we end up doing well, um, we would go and make more comics together, not more of this comic,
Right.
more of something else, and that's the goal.
Good. I mean,
Yeah.
what a crazy novel idea. Yeah, make comics. I just no, it doesn't feel compromised. So we're talking here to Joe, who's the writer of this book. And definitely click on the link, check it out. Sink to the Top is the name of the book.
Thank you.
Which I don't think I've mentioned. That the book is called Sink to the Top. Where
Hopefully, it's in the thumbnail.
it'll be in the thumbnail or the description. Yeah, people will see it. Such a bad promoter. But it doesn't, you're looking at this, and obviously comics are a visual medium.
Mhm.
And you're seeing this imagery, you're seeing this art. Again, nothing seems forced. It's playing out. It definitely feels like somebody's in for a bad time. Just for the art you see, doesn't look like we're getting a happy story, in the sense. But great work. Tell me, and we talked a little bit about the bring Caligula back to life.
Mhm.
Um, Tell me about kind of other things you're reading right now, and I know a lot of when we interview other creators, we ask them about kind of inspirations, other things. We talked about some of the past work that you've read. You and I obviously
Yeah.
read lots of comics. I think right before you came on the air, you said you were going through a run of Fantastic Four that people often overlook a bit.
Yeah.
What?
No, I haven't. So it started with I just felt like binging Fantastic Four with the movie coming out. I was like, this is a good excuse to binge.
Mhm.
So, I started with Simonson and I binged through all of that, including like Days of Future Present and, all the other stuff around it. And use that to be like, let me just read all of Tom DeFalco's run just like in its entirety. It's something I had never done prior to this. You read issues here and there, but I'm like, let me just binge it. Let me
Mhm.
read this in quick succession. And it's amazing the kind of things you realize when you binge some of these things, like the setup and payoffs that are created. So like I'm not done with DeFalco's run yet, but it's already like one of my favorite Fantastic Four runs. It's
Sure.
it's really good and thoughtful, and it's insane to me how like derided and like just not mentioned at all the run is. Like most people, when you talk to them, they will usually if they're Fantastic Four fans, they will talk about maybe 4 runs total. It'll
Yeah.
be the original Stan and Jack, the
Yeah.
John Byrne run,
Mhm.
maybe the Mark Waid run, and the Hickman run. Those are like the 4 that you'll often hear.
Yeah, that checks out. You do have a dark horse of the Simonson run in there too sometimes, but you are right. Those are
Yeah.
that's
And
about Rushmore of runs people talk about.
yeah, and I love the Simonson run. I wish it was longer
Mhm.
because he does important things in it, but like,
It's short.
you know, it's like to yeah, it's like, yeah, and there's some great stuff in there. Absolutely. It's a fun time. There's a lot of good setup. But yeah, like just in terms of like a run, because like, the Falco's on it for like, it's like 60 something issues ultimately when you count like annuals and other things.
Yep.
And one of the other elements to this as well, and this is not a knock on Simonson at all. He's one of the all time greats. Paul Ryan is on all but the last 2 issues. Like Carlos Pacheco comes in for like the last 2 issues. There is no guest penciler
Yeah.
for 58 straight issues.
Yeah. That's crazy.
That yeah, it doesn't usually happen. I mean, it has, sure, we could talk about, Bagley on Ultimate Spider-Man, some other things, but like it's very rare
Yeah.
in sort of modern comics, post, Bronze Age, post Bronze Age. Obviously Stan and Jack, had a lot of uninterrupted stuff there too. But anyway, it's a run that taps into a lot of Kirby-esque like things. It builds on the history,
Mhm.
and it's forward thinking. It's a lot of moving forward. And like you get a lot of people, for example, the Sue with the 4 tit window.
Yeah, Sue's
Uh,
booze. Yeah. That's
yeah,
what
a
people
lot of
in this run the most. Yeah.
a lot of people reference that, and most of them clearly have never read it or are willfully ignorant because it makes a lot of. First off, she's really not in it for that long of the run.
No, no, the boob window costume was less, I wanna say 4 issues or I mean, maybe more than that. It wasn't much.
Well, it's more than that, but it's not there for long because there's a whole bit where Malice is
Yeah.
taking like she is starting to she like willingly lets Malice take more control, and she's kind of like fighting with herself a bit, and it's done in an interesting way. You have that. You have Johnny is struggling with being like this young guy who thinks of himself as like, I'm a young hip guy and I'm with all these old fuddy-duddies who don't know how to be superheroes now. Punisher knows what he's doing. These other characters know what they're doing. Why am I hanging out with these guys? So you have like, but so there's this like interesting like critique and examination on where comics are going
Yeah.
that's going on in there. You have the bit with Ben with the helmet after Wolverine slashes his face, but like, and again, even that's like more well thought out. Like it's not just a goofy update to the costume to try to make him more 90s. It's him hiding the fact that he's getting an infection. It's getting worse. He doesn't know if he's going to be okay, but he's trying to like hide that from everybody. So it just adds like you end up getting all these layers and plot threads,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
it's interesting.
It's the Sue Storm stuff, which a lot of people go to, and kind of all the characters you're mentioning. There were reasons behind it. It didn't help that it was stuck right in the middle of the excesses of the '90s, where you have suddenly all the women are wearing thongs for no apparent reason with their costume, and Reed got a vest for mysterious reasons. There was a '90s element to it, but to DeFalco's
Oh,
credit,
sure.
he put a story reason behind that. And so when you read those issues, you think about it. And I'm just curious. So
Yeah.
as you're reading this and catching up on it, kind of for the first time, if you will,
Yeah.
how much of that storytelling technique do you find used in your own work? That
Oh, I mean, yeah, it's very similar to I know I mentioned like Paul Levitz when like he was doing Legion. Like there's a lot of similarities there. Like it makes sense that they tapped DeFalco to do Legion Lost for New 52, like reading this run in particular.
Mhm.
I've read like, Thor, Spider-Man, some other things, but this run in particular, I was like, oh, now I get why he wanted to do Legion or was tapped to do Legion for a little bit. Um, I think that, like I love that kind of storytelling. It feels more lived in.
Yeah,
There's a weird sort of disconnect. I know we've like touched on it. Maybe we haven't talked about directly like this or worded it this way, but like the more things seem to have shifted in a way of we have to tell stories that are more realistic or feel more real and contemporary that can relate to modern audiences, the more fantastical and unrealistic they get.
sure. Yeah,
And it's weird because this feels more gritty and grounded, and these characters are expressing like actual emotions and angst and in a way that's compelling. And maybe like you could critique some of the stuff, what like just the way things are written, not necessarily the dialogue, well, some of the dialogue in terms of shoehorning in references to the previous issue to avoid them being caption boxes. So you might get like Johnny being like, oh, Sharon Ventura, she's back, and her and the Thing still haven't gotten back together, but who knows what'll happen this time. And it's like, yeah, it's like shoehorned in, but it's like if it's trying to use the dialogue to get around just endless caption boxes to tell you what's been going on if this was the first issue you picked up.
yeah,
But beyond that, I mean, it's all really well constructed and thought out, and it feels like you're reading a story with intention. I know before we got on, I was talking about how they set up Alicia Masters coming back as Thing's girlfriend and him wearing the helmet right in like the first page of his run, where he has the Thing statue with the broken head,
Mhm.
and he's pissed and he's yelling at Johnny because he thinks Johnny did it because he was jealous or something. And that's a setup for a payoff we don't get for like a year or so.
With patience. I mean, the
Yeah.
patience to let the story and these beats play out, to actually have foreshadowing that's not going to happen for a long time. I don't know. Just listening to you talk about kind of how you came up with this book with Chase, that you can go back it right now. But just some of the how this came about, it links to, as you talk about some of these runs that you really love and as comics, and how they come together, how they're structured, how we're actually able to do things. Now you're obviously doing this in a quick 20, one and done, one shot kind of story. This, we're talking about a Tom DeFalco run of how much you say was 60 odd issues?
About 60, but there's also annuals and stuff like that. So it's
Yep.
like, oh, it's a 5-year run.
Yeah,
Like,
no,
yeah.
that's a lot. It's interesting to see the parallel in how you're taking some of these techniques as a writer. You're working with a collaborator, and I mean, it's not lost on me that I think that you could have these great ideas of what you want to do from a story and a pacing and all the rest of that kind of stuff. But if you're not paired with a good artist, just like if an artist's not paired with a good writer,
Yeah.
hard for any of the see the light of day. So glad the two of you found each other and you're putting this thing out
Thank you.
as a team here. But it's you're using techniques of people who did, 6-year runs, and I suspect you could say a lot of the same thing about George Perez, and stuff like that. But you're bringing it to comics in 2025. You're doing it in a Kickstarter kind of approach, which lends itself to one and done. It,
Yeah.
I'm. Do you think this style of storytelling? Because and I mean no offense when I say it, it feels like this style of storytelling is more the rarity than the common these days with kind of modern comics.
Yeah.
But maybe there's some signs that it's coming back. Do you have any sense of that?
I hope so. I think there's a little bit of that for sure. I mean, we have been seeing some more one and done kind of things like I really enjoy Ice Cream Man at Image. It's
Great book.
it's wonderful. I wish it came out more often, but would I feel that way if it was coming out regularly and wasn't as good? Probably not. Like it's a very good comic, a great comic, is a handful of meh issues from becoming forgettable.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I'd rather have infrequent but great. I mean, not so infrequent that we never get it, but I think Ice Cream Man's a good example.
No, that is for sure. Mhm.
And I think George Perez, I mean, a lot of his work I think is a good example. Minus of course storylines where like Captain Marvel gives birth to her lover and
Sure.
whole thing with Tara. But whatever he was working through with that era of his time.
Yeah.
I'm talking about the
Well, but no, for something like Wonder Woman, for example, that he really plotted out and it was really the force behind that whole run. I really love that run. I think it's easily one of the best Wonder Woman runs. We still go back to it. The War of the Gods stuff. I get why they maybe put too many books linking to it and stuff
Mm.
towards the end there, but overall, I think it was a fantastic run, and there's a lot of setup and payoff, and there's a lot of build up, and I love that. I mean, James Robinson's Starman run is one I go back to frequently of just like a great run, lots of setup and payoff, and he does a great job of having smaller setup and payoffs, and then having some that start from the first few issues that we don't get until the very end. So just it's a master's class. It's one of the things where I feel like if someone's about to do a superhero run, that should be required reading.
Hmm. Oh yeah, yeah. No, that's uh, criminally underread.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
like
Oh.
I would say it. You and I often get on and we talk about kind of older comics and older runs. You mentioned one, and by the way, if your answer is not, sink to the top, I don't, I you need to work on your promotion. But what's a
Sure.
current comic people should be reading
Other than Sink to the Top.
other than sink
Well,
to the top?
other than Sink to the Top. Yeah. I know, I mentioned Ice Cream Man. That's been good. I've really been, mostly enjoying, the main Green Lantern book. I think that's been very solid superhero stuff. And Jeremy Adams has been allowed to, have subplots. Like there's, Hal's getting up to something, and then we cut to, Kyle and Connor trying to figure something else out. Like that's really interesting to me. Like I'm a big fan of, that and sort of that approach. I I really have been enjoying the Universal Monsters comics over at Skybound.
Oh, tell me more about that.
Like the what was it? They did, Dracula first, which was James Tynion was writing that one.
Mhm.
And they're not quite retellings, but they do a very good job of just like feeling like an expansion on the different Universal monster movies.
Yep.
The Frankenstein one might be my favorite so far. That's written and drawn by Michael Walsh, and there's a nice hardcover collection of that. And because I think Faith Erin Hicks is doing the Mummy one, which is either just about wrapped or is wrapping, and then I think they're doing Invisible Man next. And they also did a Creature from the Black Lagoon. So like I've really been enjoying those, overall quite a bit. Some are better than others, just like anything else, because you have different creative teams and different properties, and you might like Dracula more than Frankenstein or whatever.
Oh.
But I've really been, enjoying that quite a bit.
Do you think you mentioned so? And I've only read one of those books. I'm way behind, but I've enjoyed.
Yeah.
I enjoyed the one I read. Do you think is horror? We went through this period of time where Walking Dead was big, and you saw a bunch of kind of horror kind of knockoffs. Now you're seeing kind of different elements of horror. It's a little bit like what we were talking about earlier around queer content. Is that there's not one stamp or one blueprint for how this can be done. Your book, for example, you correct me if I'm wrong, or tell the audience. This is not a horror book in the sense of a Frankenstein book. This is a mental psychological horror book. Is that fairly said? Or
No, for sure. And like you're saying, there's a lot of different kinds of horror. So like another horror book that I read recently that I believe's wrapped, or the first arc's wrapped, or is a Jump Scare by Cullen Bunn, who we have interviewed before.
Yep.
On this channel. He's been doing a bunch of horror books at Dark Horse, and he collaborated with Danny Luckert, who's a guy I've known for quite a while now. I love Danny's art. It's very visually interesting. I think if people are interested in something horror related that Cullen Bunn is doing, that one's definitely worth checking out. And there's that, and I mean, I think this is some of the best like Dynamite books that have come out in a while, like the past like year or so. Like it's been, and thankfully they got a lot of stuff figured out through the Diamond fiasco. I know the fight's not over with some of that stuff, but I mean, some of the books they're putting out, it really does feel like they really hit their stride, and they're really putting out some great stuff. From we've got like Joe Casey doing. It's like Space Quest now, I believe, is we're up to that. I think issue 2 of that's out. I think that just came out, at this time from we're recording last week. But yeah, and all like I've really enjoyed a lot of the like Elvira stuff for years. That they've been doing. I think David Avalone is writing those, and those are a lot of fun. But yeah, they've got some really interesting, different licenses than they've had in the past, and they're doing some fun stuff.
Well, it just feels like we're getting kind of a lot more variety and nuance to horror. We're getting a lot of different versions of it, and it's nice to see. In addition to the ones you mentioned, I'm enjoying still Hyde Street, very different from a title like Ice Cream Man, but Hyde Street also a done in one approach, where generally stories are closing within the same book, and I've been enjoying that. And so there's kind of, I think, signs that we're coming into a new place in comics, and maybe we will have chance to let things breathe. I know, kind of the elephant in the room. People on my channel, I think, I have a very variety of audience. I sent you some comments earlier today from a pleasant fellow, is the best way to put that. But I think people looking at something and saying, oh, it's horror, I don't want that. It's manga, I don't want that. Or it's queer content, I don't want that. I think, it's worth that second look, because in this case, this is not us, selling you on a K-pop BL book, although Al would love that, or some of the others would. But
yes,
it is truly, you're talking about psychological horror. You're tapping into a lot of the elements of the 70s. You mentioned things like Ronin as big influences. You see about that in the art. I can't stress enough the detail and complexity in the art. So once again, I'm fawning all over Chase. He's done an amazing job. And the mood that you're bringing to the pages also look great. And you and I have sat here behind these microphones. We've talked about a number of things from the linear verse to everything in between.
Yeah.
It's nice to put a focus on something you've created. And again, we can talk many, many times about this, but I don't think on the air since it came out. But a massive congratulations and thank you for getting the Rachel Pollack's work to come to life again. I think that's been awesome. What's the go home pitch for this book? We talked a lot about it, so you're sitting here for some reason. You decide to go 50 plus minutes into an interview, and you're not, which I don't understand why that would be at this point. But what would be the extra little thing that people should go? You know what? It's worth backing it beyond the fact that they're going to get the book. You will actually ship it.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, this is this is a passion project. It's a story that I feel very strongly about that I didn't want to compromise on. So we're doing it through Kickstarter. There's no sort of meddling beyond that. It is purely what Chase and I want to do. This story is, again, it's inspired by, but done today by Bronze Age, 70s, 80s comics. The layouts, I think that Ronin might be the best layouts that Frank Miller's ever had in a book.
I think that's a solid argument you can make.
Yeah. And I reread Ronin and I had Chase read Ronin and a bunch of Gene Colan Tomb of Draculas to get this, to just get that mood, getting the feel of it, doing some of the research, spending a lot of time with like 70s media, around, that time period just to, sort of really, the kids say lock in. They locked in. Is that what they do?
You've become old, Joe.
I've been old, but no, I'm going for the bit here. There.
No cap.
But that's old. I do the kids still say no cap?
No, that's what old. No. That's what old people say. The kids say.
Yeah. But yeah. So locked in. You got to lock in, or else you crash out or something. Is that what happens?
Like that? I wouldn't know.
Yeah.
That just
So now that you no longer want to back the book, let me rein you back in with but
to that.
Yeah, but no, it's it's very it's very moody, it's very uncompromising, it's a gut punch. I put a lot into this. I really want I want you to feel something. Like you're gonna feel something. This isn't just like, oh, I'm a nice light read. I'm done. I'm moving on with my day. I'm going to forget it. Like this is the kind of story that should linger. And I don't think there's enough of that that's at least getting out there in a way that's accessible or known. I'm sure, there is so much content being created. I'm sure there's stuff that's, just like probability that leans into sort of that. But this is something that again, I'm very passionate about. Chase is passionate about. We want to get this out there. We feel really inspired by stuff that I think is worth being inspired by. So, and I would like to hear another creator right now who is doing a book that's inspired by Gene Colan today.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Not a crowded field there.
No.
Well, look, Joe, we're going to come on and talk nonsense. I think there's some things we're getting set up for sure, always. But this isn't nonsense. This is a book you should back right now. So sink to the top. It's one page. Joe's not trying to hook you for 5 years of various stories and to milk out every dollar from you. You back this book. Yep. You get the story all in.
Yep.
The art, which you've been seeing hopefully on screen, but go ahead and click on over to the link and you can see more over there. We didn't talk at all about this. I never mentioned price. It'll just be a nice surprise when people go over there. But are you doing the whole like multiple tiers? Like how is that?
Yeah, it's the PDF edition is just going to be, like $10. You get the story. You don't have to worry about shipping and all that. And then, we were going to do 15 for the physical. There's an alt cover that's going to be 20, and then you can get both for 30. And then there's going to be a nice bookmark. There's going to be stickers.
Good.
Yeah, there's going to be a print of the cover. It's a wraparound. The main cover is a wraparound cover.
Okay.
That I got some very kind words from Klaus Janson on.
So, very nice.
Yeah. I saved that for the end because I'm an idiot.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah,
yeah.
That's well, so a proper editor would pull that stuff forward. A lot of the person knew what they were doing, which is not me for sure. Well, very good. And then maybe if people back to a certain tier, you'll go ahead and just add a couple more pages where I haven't seen the story where the character just gets brutalized some more in some form or fashion psychologically.
If it really takes off, we'll figure something out. But but also, what's great about this is, the shipping prices are all going to be included. So depending on where you are in the world or whatever, it's going to be in there. So you don't have to worry about, like, just give us money and then later we'll tell you have to pay us $50 to ship it to you.
There are no excuses in Wes over there in the Philippines. You can just get it.
Absolutely. Get the PDF, Wes. But then there's that, and you can also, because I don't have an online store, but you can buy through this as an add-on. I've got copies of trades of, She Said Destroy, Beckstar, Dahlia in the Dark, The Never-Ending Party, which I co-wrote with Rachel Pollack, and then both volumes of King Arthur and the Knights of Justice. So you can use this campaign to be like, oh, hey, I want to pick this up, but also let me just run through and, grab, a couple more things that Joe's done. You can do that. Chase is going to do some commissions. There's going to be a limited number of slots for, sort of like digital avatar commissions, as well as some, pen and ink commissions. So that'll be on there. One of the add-ons is going to be a sketch of the main character that Chase did, that there's only the one copy of. So whoever gets on there early enough and can snag that, that'll happen. Maybe it won't be there by the time you listen to this video. Maybe this video you don't get to for a few months and you missed out.
I'm promising Joe I'll get this out on time, but it would be funny. I need to figure out, because I get requests from time to time from people who want to kind of hawk the book, and the person has clearly forgotten being a world-class a-hole to me in the past. And so I should at some point go ahead and I'll record the interview and then just release it my normal release schedule sometime after Christmas. And it's like, oh, that's a shame. You knew what you were in for, asshole. All right. Yeah. Anyway, Joe, look, much success. Again, the book looks great. I'm excited to read it. Definitely will support. And I mean, we need more. I like psychological horror. I'm a huge fan of David Lynch. I'm a huge fan of this kind of work. And now I in all sincerity, big fan of Chase. This looks beautiful.
Thank you.
So great book. Go back it. And Joe, thank you very much for all your time here today.
Great. Thank you for having me.
All right. Go back the book, folks. And thanks for listening.